Welcome, everybody, to Recipes for Success. My name is Jana Weiss. I'm the Student Life Coordinator for Global Online. And today we are talking about metacognition, learn how to learn and developing learning strategies. And we have two wonderful guests who are partners in our Recipes for Success, which is the Academic Success Centers. We have Amanda Guerrero and Juanita Martinez. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having us, Jana. We're excited to be here with you guys, and welcome to all of our students, faculty, and staff who've decided to join us for today's workshop. We're going to be talking a little bit more about metacognition. Really, it's teaching yourself how to learn and understanding what that looks like for you. And being the responsible scholars that we are, most of the content that we are going to be providing for you today has come from this book that you see on the screen, and feel free to take a screenshot or a picture if you have any sort of interest in wanting to read the book. But we're going to give you a high-level overview of some of the things that you can do practice-wise to understand how you learn best and what you can do to implement that.
Metacognition. It's a fancy word, but let's try to understand it a little bit better. It's the use of self-reflecting awareness and adjustments to behaviors that support goal-directed processes. In other words, it's the ability to think about your own thinking, be consciously aware of yourself as a problem solver. This is where you plan, monitor, evaluate, and control your mental processing. For example, am I understanding the material or just memorizing it? And to accurately judge your level of learning. So basically, it's know what you know and what you don't know.
Out of curiosity, how might you answer questions? What the most of your
Amanda, I can't hear you.
I'm not on mute. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. So, what did most of your teachers in high school do the day before the test? And what did they do during this activity? What grade do you think you would have made on a test if you had only gone to class that day before the test? And do you think you might succeed in your college level courses using that same strategy? So most of our teachers in high school would go over the review, right? And maybe they gave it to you a couple days in advance. You're supposed to go through and answer the questions, and then the day before the test, you guys review over it, make sure you have the right answers, and then you study that, right? So that is kind of in a nutshell, and it was probably easier to get by in high school doing this process. But we're going to talk about how things kind of change once you get into college level courses.
Okay, so how does metacognition empower a student? Here's an example of a first-year calculus student who made grades starting at 79, 54, and then it started a little bit better, 90, 95, and 90. So let's talk about what changed. So before metacognition, the student was probably memorizing formulas and using online homework problems. After utilizing metacognition, they were solving problems with no external aids and testing the mastery of the concepts. So what type of strategies did the student use to become a better student? So let's talk a little bit more about that.
Effective homework strategies. So before actually going to class, it is advised that you take a look at your syllabus and know what's upcoming for that class. Study the materials before going, even looking at what the problems and the questions are. And then obviously once you go to class, make sure you're taking effective notes. Work the example problems if there are example problems that are provided without looking at the solutions. It's a great idea to get a Post-it note or even an index card, and if the actual steps in a problem are provided for you, put the card over the top of the problem and go through each step on your own. And move it down to make sure you're on point with what those might be. And then check to see if your answer is correct. If it's not correct, figure out where your mistake was. And then obviously being able to ask for help, knowing where to go for help. A lot of students don't understand what a professor's office hours are. A professor's office hours are designed for students. It's not for them to be sitting there grading. Of course, if they don't have any students that need office hours, they're going to fill that time with such activities. But understand and ask your professors, what are your office hours and how do you prefer that I reach out to you if I have questions or I need to talk? Then we also talk about peer study groups. It is a great idea when you start your classes to pay attention to your classmates around you and see if you can find some commonalities with some of your fellow classmates. It's a great idea to get together outside of the class, whether it be right before the class or right after the class or whenever. Works best for all of you to go through, the material that was covered in class. Make sure that if you had any gaps in notes, things like that, that you're able to share that with one another. Some of our courses at HCC are supplemental instruction courses. It's a great idea to ask your advisors which ones are SI classes versus which ones are not. And the reason why is because SI is a great program for peer studying. It's a structured study. It's like group tutoring that's built into the curriculum, basically. And then there's tutoring. So you're going to hear us talk about tutoring a lot because that's the world that Juanita and I come from. And at HCC, you have access to free tutoring resources. It's really simple to use. We'll get into a little bit more details later about how that goes. Obviously, another effective homework strategy is to work your homework problems and answer questions as if you were taking a test. Just a couple of tidbits on that.
Okay, so why is using the textbook so important? Okay, what word comes to mind when you see C_T? Would this word have come to your mind if we lived in a culture that had no cats, or you've never seen the word before? Our brains automatically fill in missing information if we're familiar with the content. Great example are text messages. Everything's abbreviated, but you're familiar with it because you've been acquainted with the information. Does your brain have the info to fill in what's missing in the course notes? Will the test be written from what your brain or the professor brain sees in the course notes? So that's why it's very important to read those books. I know some of those books are very big and a lot of information is stored in there, but it's important to go through it.
Effective reading comprehension. This is something I actually really like to talk about. So it's really helpful if you were to preview your text before reading and to be developing an anticipatory set of questions in your mind. If you're assigned to read, say, 2 chapters before your next class or 3 chapters before your next class, it's a great idea to do an outline format where at first you read the main heading of the chapter. Sometimes they have a little introduction, taking a look at what's in the margins on each page before you actually go into the details of reading. Look at the bold print. And if you need to make some notes on what that is, and even the summary at the end of the chapter, I would do that for each of the chapters before actually going into reading the details. The first and the last sentence of every paragraph is very telling. So as you're reading, read one paragraph at a time. And it's a great idea if you're able to take, a whole paragraph, 5, 6, 7 sentences, and be able to paraphrase it into one for yourself. Take notes on that. We like to talk about something called the SQ5R strategy. So that's a little bit of what I talked about here, like survey. You look at the introduction, you look at the summary, you look at the bold print, the italicized words, and then question. Devise questions that help you to think about, like, what did I need to know from this particular paragraph? Read one paragraph at a time, summarize it in your own words, record or write. You can annotate in the margins. Just understand if you're looking to resell your book, do it in pencil. Review the summary at the end of the chapter and then reflect. Hopefully you're reading your chapters for each course before the class starts. That gives you such a great advantage when you get into the course to know what the lecture is going to be about, and it helps you progress your learning even more.
Developing your metacognitive skills. what's the difference between studying and learning? Studying is memorizing and focusing on the what's, which is usually short-term learning and it could be forgotten. Learning is focusing on the hows, the whys, and the what ifs, which promotes a better understanding of the material and applying what you've learned. So learning leads towards more learning. In other words, you're going to ask yourself some questions as you're progressing in your coursework. Why do I need to know this information? Would I be able to teach this to my classmates? So on the right-hand side is a first-year student testimony. This is a student that stated, I attended the supplemental instruction sessions and the exam reviews. Before the exam reviews and SI sessions, I would try to answer as many of the questions as possible to see where I was in terms of grasping the information. Then at the exam and SI session, I would know what I needed to understand. Next, after the reviews and SI session, I would go to my room and teach the material to my beta fish. The material I could explain, I would study more. Oh, and the material I couldn't explain, I would study more. I would continue that cycle until I could explain everything in my notes. So in other words, as somebody who learned that as all the information that I'm learning, would I be able to teach it to a beta fish, to perhaps a sibling or a classmate? These are just ways of reinforcing what you learn. Sometimes when I was learning something new, I would teach it to myself in a mirror. I wanted to feel comfortable with the information I was learning.
So when you're asked the question, what do you know about learning? Active learning is more lasting than passive learning. Some people would say that passive learning in itself, the two words put together, is an oxymoron. If you think about thinking as something that's important, that is exactly what metacognition is. It's understanding and thinking about how you think and how you learn. The level at which you learn occurs, it's described very distinctly for anybody who becomes an educator in something called Bloom's taxonomy, which is a really neat theory. And hopefully you'll find it to be helpful. We're going to go through what Bloom's taxonomy is and what those levels are.
Okay, so Bloom's taxonomy is a hierarchy of learning levels. So look at this pyramid. You see the base. The base is going to be the foundation of everything you're learning. So it starts with remembering. This is where you can recall facts and basic concepts. Most of the time you're asked to define something, duplicate, list, or memorize, or repeat information. The next level is understand. Explain ideas or concepts. This is where you classify, describe, discuss, explain, whether it be a written presentation or a written document. And next, you will apply what you learn. You use information in new situations. So therefore, you execute, you implement, solve, use, demonstrate, and interpret, operate, schedule, and sketch. Now, the next item is analyze. This is where you draw connections among ideas. You differentiate, organize, relate, compare and contrast, distinguish, examine, and experiment. So now you're really applying what you learn. Next level is evaluate. Justify a stand or decision. This is where you appraise, argue, defend, judge, support, and value or critique something. Now at the very top is create. You produce new or original work. You design something. You can assemble, construct, develop, and formulate. You can even author or investigate. This is where you have applied everything you learn, and now you're being creative with the information. You're actually assembling something, and you're designing something with an end result, possibly to solve problems as well.
So what is your response to this question? At what level of Bloom's taxonomy do you think you had to operate in to make A's or B's in high school? Do you think it was remembering, understanding? You can put your answers in the chat. Analyzing, evaluating, creating, any combination of these particular 6 areas?
No answers yet. Let's see what we have.
Okay. So this is where you guys get to interact and start thinking about it.
1, 4, and 5, 2, 2,
Yeah.
4 and 5, 3.
Definitely for me, 3 and 2.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. So at what level of Bloom's taxonomy do you think you'll need to operate in to make A's in college courses?
Now in college. 1
All of
through
them
6,
under
all of
6.
them, yes.
Yeah.
All of them.
A lot higher of a level, right? The expectations, I don't think we have a lot of conversations in high school about how to best prepare for entering into college. It's like once you get in, there's a lot of trial and error, right? So we're hoping to kind of help you guys with some of the skills that you can implement and put into place that will help you get to those higher level, learning aspects so you can be successful. Let's go to the next slide, please.
Okay. We really like this one, the study cycle, and we actually got permission to borrow this infograph from Louisiana State University. So if you take a look at this on the left-hand side, there's the study cycle. You have the start right there in the left-hand side. So for starters, you're going to preview, you're going to skim material, take some notes, and try to form a bigger picture of what you're learning. You're going to attend class, take notes, and ask questions. And then you're going to review. You're going to read your notes, fill in the gaps, form questions as you're studying. Now studying time is broken up into this focused study session. Starting with the planning, you're going to set a specific goal. How much of the information, how much of the chapter do I need to learn? How much time am I going to spend on this? So while you're studying, you're using effective study strategies to deeply engage with the material and use concept maps. You're going to read for comprehension. You're going to work some problems. And remember, you're going to think critically about asking the whys, hows, and what ifs. I think someone needs to mute.
Yeah, we can do it.
Okay, and then the next step, you're going to take a break. You're going to step away, clear your mind, just kind of recap after that and summarize what you've learned. And then you're going to choose, are you going to continue studying, take a longer break, or change tasks or subjects? Because you may have other classes that you're taking. Perhaps you want to start studying for something else or continue. So going through this study cycle, you're going to continue with checking. Can I teach this? Have I mastered the information? And you're going to repeat this cycle for the same class or for all of your classes.
So time management, blocking out study time. If you have no idea where to start with scheduling study time, consider attending SI sessions if available, scheduling tutoring appointments. I'm going to go ahead and pop the number for our tutoring call center into the chat. It would be great if you guys program that telephone number into your cell phones, just label it HCC Tutoring. Tutoring is free to you here at HCC. We have approximately 200 tutors who are prepared to help you through Microsoft Teams virtually, or you can come into one of our 15 academic success centers and receive tutoring that way. Scheduling tutoring appointments is really easy. You just call that telephone number and we can work from there. But use this formula to get a rough idea about how many hours per week you should study for each class based on the number of credit hours and the difficulty level for the class. So 1 is low, 2 is moderate, 3 is high regarding the difficulty level of your course. So if you're taking a 3 credit hour course and you say it's got a medium level of difficulty for you, you're going to probably need at minimum 6 hours a week for studying for that class. Now, as the class goes on, you can adjust the amount based on what's required for the class and how quickly you're retaining the material. So looking at your schedule, I'm a very big fan of manual schedules. I have this going at all times. I'm a little old school like that. Some people like electronic schedules. I actually use both, but it's not a bad idea to block out. I mean, let's face it, you guys probably have work, you have school, some of you have families, families meaning kids of your own or other obligations that you're responsible for. So having a calendar and a schedule where you can section things out, and you need to implement like self-care and exercise routines and stuff like that into your calendar, right? Blocking those times out and putting class time just as important as any of those are study times just as important as any of those other obligations is going to help you quite a bit. But just putting it on the calendar is not enough. You actually have to implement that. So stick to whatever schedule you devise for yourself. And Serenity, to answer your question, upon calling the center, if we have somebody available like right then and there and you're ready, we will try to warm transfer you to a tutor and get you going. If what you need is offered, like we don't have a tutor at that time, or if you're not available right then and there, we can schedule an appointment out. You can also drop into the academic success centers to see what the availability of tutoring is, and you can schedule appointments that way too.
Okay, so another strategy is mindset about your own intelligence. If you have a fixed mindset, your intelligence is static. Everyone has a certain amount of it. For example, someone's going to state, personally, I'm not good at chemistry, and at this point, my grade for the class is reflecting exactly that. But someone with a growth mindset, they're going to have intelligence, it can be developed, and they're going to grow with actions. So in other words, they're going to tell themselves, I ended up earning a 90 in the course, but I started with a 60. I think what I did different was make side notes in each chapter, and as I progressed onto the next chapter, I was able to refer to those notes. I would say that in chemistry, everything builds from the previous topic. That's pretty much true. That's why it's very important to read those chapters in the textbook.
So the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. In a fixed mindset, an individual might think that intelligence is static, that you're born with a certain amount of it, and that is how intelligent that you can be from birth to death. It sometimes leads to a desire for the person to look smart, and therefore the tendency to avoid challenges. When obstacles come up, they give up easily. They see effort as fruitless. They ignore useful negative feedback, or they look at criticism not as something that can help them, but as something that is bad. And when they see other people succeed, they feel threatened by their success. And as a result of this, they might plateau early and achieve less than their full potential. All of this confirms a very deterministic view of the world. Now, if you flip it over and you have an individual who has a growth mindset, and by the way, it's perfectly natural and normal to flip between the two. It could be situational, it could be seasonal, it could be any variable of things. But being aware of your thoughts and identifying, is this something that is a fixed or a growth mindset type thing, helps you to determine, do I need to reframe how I'm thinking about this, right? So in a growth mindset, intelligence is something that the person believes that intelligence can be developed. It leads to the desire to learn more, and therefore a tendency to embrace challenges. When obstacles come, instead of giving up, they would persist in the face of obstacles, maybe look at it as a challenge. With regards to effort, they see that effort is a path to mastery, and they learn from criticism. Maybe it was negative criticism, maybe it was positive criticism. It doesn't really matter to somebody who has a growth mindset. They're taking criticism in, and they're kind of, instead of being defensive about things, they might look at it and say, I wonder what the golden nuggets in this situation might be that I can become even better and stronger because of, right? They find lessons and inspiration when other people are successful around them. Like, hey, if they can do this, I certainly can too. I just need to go back and figure out where I need to, tweak some things. So as a result of that, they tend to reach higher levels of achievement in life, and it gives them a greater sense of what they're capable of.
Okay, so your key takeaway as far as strategies are concerned: effective homework strategies always solve problems without looking at an example or solution. Or you could use effective reading comprehension skills. Memorize what you're told to memorize. Ask yourself, what am I supposed to know after reading each chapter? Develop metacognitive learning strategies. Can you summarize or teach what you have learned? Bloom's taxonomy. Aim for higher order thinking skills. Study cycle. Spend time working on your subjects every day. Attend SI or tutoring sessions early and frequently. And have a growth mindset. Aim for 100% mastery. So which strategy will you use?
So to fail or not to fail. So here are the top 5 reasons why students fail. They didn't spend enough time on the material. They started doing their homework late. They did not memorize the information, have a foundational understanding of the information. They didn't use their textbook. They assumed to know material, but did not apply what was learned. And here are the top 5 ways to avoid failing. Do a review before every class of the textbook and the material. Do your homework in little bits at a time instead of waiting until the last minute. Use your book and whatever suggested problems, worksheets, readings, etc. that your professor gives you. Make flashcards for information that you need to use to memorize, especially things like vocabulary words. And then practice explaining the information to others. So just like the example with the betta fish, it doesn't have to necessarily be another person, although that's helpful because you can always get feedback. But even if you're just looking in the mirror and you're explaining the information to yourself, that works too. So the question then becomes, are you committed to your own success? My guess is yes, because you're on this call, but let's keep going.
Okay, so in addition, we offer the following counseling services at HCC. So if you were to go to the main website, of course, you can do a search on counseling. And within that web address, you'll find information about, personal counseling, ADA counseling, crisis counseling, student success and retention workshops. A lot of information is provided by your counselors. So take a look at that if you ever have a chance.
And we've popped this telephone number in the chat. If you have questions with your coursework, we can help. In the Academic Success Centers, we have lab assistants and tutors that are there to assist you. Again, we can meet through Microsoft Teams or we can meet in person on campus. The easiest route for you to get connected to us is to call that telephone number. What I will say is when you do come for tutoring, make sure that you have your class notes, your homework problems, your syllabus, and your textbook. If you have feedback from your instructor about what it is that you need to work on, that's even better because then it gives a certain level of focus on your tutoring session to the tutor and they know where to go from there.
Also, I wanted to state that you can meet with the tutor virtually using Microsoft Teams if you're not able to be on campus. So that's an option. It's still face-to-face as well as on-campus face-to-face. Anybody have any questions?
Camilla has a question. How do we know which classes are the most difficult when calculating study time? Would this be a guess made after we already signed up?
Not necessarily. So what might be difficult for me may be easy for you and vice versa, right? So it's very individualized. You know yourself and you know what you might have struggled with in the past. It's not a bad idea when you're signing up for classes to have this conversation with your advisor as well, because they also know like historically classes that students tend to struggle with the most, and they can help you build a schedule where you're pairing like a more difficult course with a less difficult course just to like pace yourself in a way that you're not overly stressed out. But a lot of people have math anxiety. A lot of people find math courses to be difficult. I, on the other hand, am a STEM person. I love math, but ask me to memorize history stuff and like do writings and things like that, I'm gonna have to take a lot more time to work on that kind of thing. So it's really, really dependent upon the person. The sciences can sometimes be difficult for some people, especially if there's like a lab and a lot of memorizing, like anatomy and physiology, memorizing a lot of Latin words. We find that to be hard. Physics, that's hard. I will say, even I struggled with physics and statistics sometimes. You have to spend a lot of time on some of those courses. All right. We want to thank you guys again for coming today. Very glad that you did, and I hope that you got something out of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Hope to see you at our next event, and I hope this was very helpful for you. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful week.